fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. Michael, decorating his house, Holly, is co-hosting today.
That is correct. Halloween is supreme right at the moment.
I didn't realize. I saw you all dressed up as, what was that, Raider of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
I was packing heat.
Yeah, there you go. See, and I guess a lot of people were partying this weekend, and I didn't even think about it. I don't know why.
I was under orders to party, so
I
had to.
Yeah, the Betty Boop wife with the whip.
I fear her.
Yeah.
So.
You had no choice. Yeah, or you were under duress.
That's correct. Which is exciting about talking about that today, because I want to talk about Stokerverse beer.
There you go. And we got the man to do it, Mr. Chris McAuley. So thank you for being here, Chris.
Hello, folks. Thanks for having me on again.
Nice speaking with you again.
Yeah, Chris, what's going on in the Stokerverse? It seems like a lot of activity. There's so many things. You guys are busy.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we're juggling. We'll start with the beer. Why not? The beer is fun. So there's a history behind this that every year since I think about 2022, Stokerverse has been going for 3 years now. So 2022. Usually we partner up with a brewery, and we would do a little limited edition release. Because the real reason is I love beer. I think beer is a clear indication that God wants us to be happy on this earth. Yeah, so we team up with a local brewery, and we get a beer out. Like we had one called Long Tooth Red, which is a red ale. We had one called Impaler Ale. I think that was the first one we had. And it's usually just an excuse just to have a bit of fun. So this one we have out is called Invite Me In, from Trial and Ale in Alberta, Canada. And this one's a little different because this one is actually going out to various gourmet restaurants across Alberta. So it's fun, and it's not your usual beer. It's what's known as a sour beer. So it's a slightly tangy beer. Yeah, the base of it is cranberry. And there's a bit of distribution network across US and Europe. So that's going to be fun just to see where this one goes.
Right.
Well, where did, when you talk about the beer, but where does that come from? Like, what kind of idea? How do you come up with something like that? I mean, it sounds trivial, but it's not. I just mean, like, how do you put your mind onto, let's do beer?
I think it was a case at the time of, what were we releasing? I think it was Dracula's Bedlam we were releasing at the time. Around Halloween 3 years ago, and I thought it would be a cool idea maybe to launch it in a pub. And let's be completely honest, it was just an excuse to sort of have a bit of a party at a pub at Halloween. And what's cooler than having your own beer, right? So that's really where it came from. And I said to Dacre, how do you feel about this? Do you think it would be great? And he said, yeah, I'll record a promo. We'll do the whole thing. So we had this idea of a promo where he would be on the screen, like doing a live feed, essentially, and I would hand him up a beer, and then he would grab the beer on the screen and pull it up. So, of course, we had this all very carefully choreographed. So I put the beer up to the screen, and then there's a little ledge just behind the TV screen, and I would set the beer there, and he would reach down from his table and lift the beer up. So we had this choreographed 2 or 3 times. It didn't work as well as we thought it would, but that still was fun. But we did that sort of a thing, and it was Trial and Ale came to us. I think it was 3 weeks ago. They knew we did this sort of thing every year, and they said, "Hey, look, we'd really like to do a beer to tie in with their universe." And so that's really where it came from this year, where they came to us and said that we'd like to do it. They explained that they had like various restaurants, and they pair beers with various foods and things like that. So I think we're getting paired with a series of gourmet pizzas, and apparently the this particular type of beer goes well with certain cheeses. I don't claim to understand all this stuff at all. But yeah, it's great. It was out on Friday. We launched the beer last Friday. I think we sold a keg of it that day. And yeah, I turned up. I had one or two beers. We got a couple of photos. There were some Halloween bits and pieces out. So it just was a lot of fun. And then I think, Halloween is Thursday, so they're going to have a little bit of a promo on Thursday. And then we're looking at possibly getting this out to US and Europe very soon.
Wow.
Sweet. Count me in.
Yeah, well, look, I'll tell you what, we get these beers in cans, because you can them. I'll send you a couple.
Sweet. I'm in Buffalo. Close to Toronto.
Yeah. It could be doable, and then I'm not sure we could ship you a pizza, but we'll tell you what type of pizza it could go with, and yeah, you could have the whole meal experience, right?
Oh yeah, and Buffalo's known for their pizza, so I think I would get in trouble by all my the pizza joints around here. You're not getting pizza here?
Well, and I noticed you've got a card game too now. So what's going on? Like, who comes up with these ideas?
I'll be honest, it's me. I come up with the crazy madcap ideas. But Stokerverse really cornered the market with the RPG. We had a miniature game from Cricket Dice. I think there's 70 miniatures in the miniature war game. We moved into tabletop, and it proved pretty lucrative. And we're always keen to kind of move into new areas. And there's a company called Iconic. So Iconic do franchises like Evil Dead, Saw, those kind of They Live, all those kind of franchises, horror franchises, as well as at Capcom's Silent Hill. And I approached them and said, would you like to do a Stokerverse card game? And they got very excited. So we came up with a premise that basically it's up to 6 players, and you play as a hunter that the villagers have hired to go and take out Dracula and his evil minions. This is set 100 years before the novel. And it's just an excuse to play this really fun game where you've got to defeat as many evil creatures as you possibly can. And it's a competitive game, so you're up against your friends. Or you can play it solo, actually. It can be a solo dungeon run. And the big thing about this is that it contains characters, the Dacre Stoker characters like Countess Dollars and Gratz, the White Worm. Obviously, we've got Dracula in there. It wouldn't be a Stokerverse game like Dracula. And then various other sort of like monsters like the Golem, a mummy, an Irish werewolf called Phelan in there. So yeah, it's fun. It's at the printers at the minute. We've got a worldwide release for this. So this will be the first Stokerverse product going into Asian territories. So that's very, very, it's wonderful. So yeah, the card game is and it's illustrated by Samuel Santos. So I sent you guys a little zip file just with various images, and I think there's a few images of the card game in there. Dacre and I got a prototype, a very advanced prototype, and it's beautiful. It's really, really cool. So, yeah, I'm very excited about that one.
You have the White Worm in it. Now, the White Worm was not part of Dracula, though, right? That was just Bram Stoker's other book?
That was his other book. But what we do in the Stokerverse is kind of bring all those characters into a single universe.
Oh, okay.
So we bring in the Queen Terra from Jill of Seven Stars, the White Worm from there, the White Worm.
Yeah. And
various other characters and things like that. And then we would reimagine characters as if Bram would have written them.
Okay.
So that's quite fun. So like, for example, Sherlock Holmes, because Bram Stoker and Arthur Conan Doyle were very good friends. And we would look at Sherlock Holmes and go, okay, well, what would Bram have done with that? So a point of divergence there would be the Sussex vampire story. So instead of it being the young boy, it's actually really a Sussex vampire that Sherlock Holmes meets. And that's the point of divergence from Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes into the Stokerverse Sherlock Holmes.
I getcha.
So what kind of features have you got coming out? You've got another film in the works too, right? You guys, right?
Yeah, we teamed up with XG3 Film Productions, and they're based in New York. And we decided that we wanted to look at the character of Carmilla, Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla. And we've already brought it into the Stokerverse in a way, where Carmilla's Dracula's niece. But we wanted to do something that was a homage to Nosferatu as well as Carmilla. So this is a short film. It'll be a silent film, and it's going to be on location in a place called Carrickfergus in Northern Ireland, and there's a little forest there. So we're filming that in 2 weeks' time. So that's quite exciting.
Silent, huh? A silent film.
Yeah, decided to do that. I had thought of like a Nosferatu homage.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of a little bit of that sort of like a mashup. And yeah, it was fun. We did principal photography for it a couple of weeks ago. So all girls in their costumes and all sorts, and they were showing us what it would look like, in the forest with the lighting and all that. So yeah, it's cool and fun to be part of a project like that.
So it's silent, but not black and white.
No, it's not black and white. No. That will be actually we had an interesting choice there of whether we would desaturate colour or have it colorized. So I tend to like the fact that it would be colorized because especially this time of year, in Ireland, if you're filming it around about 6 o'clock at night, you get some lovely hues of colours and shadows, and that could be you're telling the story really through that lighting. So there will be text that pops up like Nosferatu that sort of explains the story a little bit, but because it's not a talkie, there's a lot more emphasis on the actors' faces, expressions, and lighting, and all that sort of stuff. So that's another. It's an interesting project that really just happened, and Dacre and I wrote the script for it, and yeah, it's going to be, I think it's 10-minute short, so it's clocking in at 10 minutes. So that should be hitting film festivals next year. Silent but deadly. Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of quite a life of doing this. Like, what do you want to get or see become from Stokerverse? Like, what do you for the big picture? What is it? Do you have an image of what you want to do with this world?
We're not really allowed to talk about it yet, but we are. Like, the television series is on the horizon. I can't go into the details of it, but it's on the horizon. And I think that's probably one of the big milestones would be to bring the Stokerverse to television. But really, I think just continuing to tell good stories and have fun with it. Respect what Bram had created, but also just have fun with it as well. I have a tremendous amount of fun writing Dracula and monsters, and working on the games, like the video game and the card game, and we've actually got a dice game coming out called Dr. Frankendice, and it's a family friendly game, and basically it's like you build your own monster, and you have to ward off the villagers before they come and attack your castle. And that was something that actually came up whenever I rang Dacre. He's maybe playing with his grandkids or whatever, and really there's no way for him to communicate to his grandkids like Bram Stoker's legacy or what he's doing in the Stokerverse. They're quite young, and Dacre would tell you himself he was fairly old before any of this Bram Stoker stuff was really explained to him. So I said to him, I said, would you like something that you could play with your grandkids with, and it would just be a fun Stokerverse thing? And he said, yeah. So that's when we created the Frankendice game. So again, that's a bit, that just came out of the blue. And then a game company decided they wanted to do it. They liked the idea of it. And it's a big sideways step for the Stokerverse, because most Stokerverse stuff is quite grisly and gory and, all of that sort of stuff. But this one's definitely...
Well, Chris, I can see Stokerverse, the gory part, you guys starting a Chamber of Horrors wax museum, Stokerverse, have it all. That would be cool.
Yeah, we did get approached. We got approached, I think it was a year or two ago, to do like a Dracula experience. It would have been like like almost like a theme park type thing. And that was an interesting proposition. Like I say, I'm not adverse to anything as long as it's respectful and it's fun. Those are the two things that I think are very important. The Stokerverse is, it started off looking at the Dracula that Bram had created, and we keep to that stylistic choice. But as the franchise moves on, we're creating different stories now. We're moving into like the First World War era. We're really creating our own sort of original timeline now, which is pretty cool. So we're not locked in the gaslit Victorian streets. We're moving out into America and telling a story as well in the Psalm of the video game. So it kind of moves on about 20 years after Dracula. And we've got Mina Harker's son. We've got Quincy Morris's daughter there, a daughter that he didn't know that he had, and she comes to London looking for traces of her dad. So there's there's a pretty cool plot line to that. And one of the big things about the Stokerverse video game is that we got Glenn Fabry to do the cover for the game, and Glenn's well known to comic book fans who's the artist on the Preacher series, as well as many 2000 AD and Marvel titles. He had done game artwork for the Incredible Hulk game, Marvel War of the Gems, Punisher, those kind of video games in the past. So the fact he wanted to do this was lovely. It was another nice stamp, artistic stamp on the scene of quality on the product and on the franchise.
Yeah, interesting. The whole world and stuff, right? So what's going on in the horror community and stuff? Are you big into the horror community and what goes on in that area?
I'm friends with a lot of horror writers. I'm not really a part of any community as such. But I'm friends with a lot of horror writers and I watch what they do and, obviously support horror writing as a whole. I did say on another podcast last week that I don't really watch a whole lot of horror films. Horror films have never really floated my boat. It's always been books. I've always been more into literary horror, When I was growing up, same as most people, when I was growing up, I was reading Stephen King. And I remember, the horror book that affected me the most was actually The Stand. And I went, in my little push bike, I went up to the local library, and we had the tiniest library in our village, and they had a copy of the unabridged version of The Stand. It was a big hardback copy, and on the front cover there was these lightning bolts, So I grabbed it and I had to balance it on the handlebars as I was pushing the little bike home, and then I had to get the book in without my parents seeing it. Horror was a banned topic in my home. It was not something that you didn't watch or something you didn't read, because my parents were very religious. So, it was always forbidden fruit in a way. So, I read Stephen King, went on to Clive Barker, the Books of Blood, which I just absolutely adore. Obviously moved into reading Dracula and all of that stuff when I was young too. So I'm more into literary horror than I am horror films. Now, I've written a couple of horror films that are going into production next year. Shorts, half hour to an hour shorts. And I really enjoy horror films. I enjoy The Witch. That's not real psychological horror. I really enjoy it. I tried films like The Terrifier this weekend, but just not my thing. Just not my thing. So I'm sort of discovering horror as a film genre. It's lovely just to sort of chat to fellow horror writers and see what they're doing. And horror is an extremely innovative genre. So, everybody's doing, completely different stuff. We're all doing, I write Lovecraftian stuff as well. So there's its own sub-community, which I've been finding out a lot, and all the Lovecraftian lore. So I get schooled on that quite regularly by the Lovecraft experts. They'll say, "Hey, have you written about the Yellow King yet? Have you? No. Oh, you should write a story. Have you heard about the Yellow King? No, I haven't. Well, go and read this." And so I find the horror writing community is very very welcoming. I mean, I've only started writing it's been 3 years. I've only been a writer for 3 years. I always remind people that because they forget that. I go, no, I only started writing 3 years ago. So there's still lots for me to learn.
And you're involved with the Terminator 40th anniversary book as well?
I am. That was, again, I've been working on Terminator stuff for about 2 years now. So I wrote stories for the official Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 RPGs. And then I get invited to do a couple of stories, 5 interlocked stories, within the timeline of the future war for the Terminator 40th anniversary book. So, yeah, I mean, I love Terminator.
Oh, yeah.
And it's real cyberpunk, dark cyberpunk horror. You know, 1 and 2 are obviously seminal classics. One I think is more my favourite than 2 because of the body horror and the scenes of the future war, which are really dark, really depressing. So yeah, I'm doing that as well. And then just to segue into a little more sci-fi, I'm on the front cover of Star Trek Explorer magazine, the official Star Trek magazine, on Wednesday, actually. It comes out on Wednesday. And I had written a Star Trek story which is set between Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock.
Oh, neat.
So, yeah, it was my first ever time writing Star Trek. And it was interesting because there were, you know, you're sending the story in, it goes to the editor of the magazine, they liked it had to go up to Paramount. Paramount had to check it out, make sure it was okay, especially because it was touching on the original movies. They rubber stamped it and said, yep, this is now canon, and that's coming out in the next issue of Star Trek Encounters. And then I have another Star Trek story coming out in a historic Star Trek anthology. It's the first anthology to feature every series. So from Enterprise to, what are we on now, Strange New Worlds. So it features all that. I've written an original series story in there, and it's coming out with Titan Books in December. So I didn't expect to be doing any of that at all.
Right.
It just sort of happened.
He's a busy man, I'll tell you. So why didn't you like the Terrifier? What was it about it that you didn't care for?
I love the guy who's the clown, Art the Clown. I thought he was brilliant. And I think there were moments there, like my favourite moments were, you know, when he was sitting in the cafe and he was menacing those girls. His facial expression, how he acted, was fantastic. But I think for me, it was just a gore fest. It was just a slasher film. And I think, you know, for me, there was a scene where he saws a girl in half and not quite like the magic trick. And yeah, I didn't like that. I just thought, I'm not a fan of over the top, schlocky, gory horror. I definitely like my horror more psychological. Having said that, actually, I love The Thing, and The Thing's full of gory moments like that. But there's that psychological tension of who's human, who's not. The paranoia really makes The Thing for me, because I remember watching it for the first time, and it was like, yeah, I was like glued to the screen. I was quite young, and I was glued to the screen. And,
with Kurt Russell, that one?
Yeah,
that
one was just absolutely incredible.
Yes.
Now the special effects were out of this world, and they were gory and horrific, and I think they actually served as moments of release. They were punctuated moments of release, because it was almost like a murder mystery of who's done it, or who's still human.
Right.
And that to me was where the real meat of the film was.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love the first Alien film for the same reason.
Oh yeah.
That it's haunted house in space, and it's that eerie atmosphere, the sound design as well, the chains clanking. I can hear in my mind now, whenever Brett gets picked up by the alien and lifted, his sort of like screams, his confusion that turn into screams of horror, which then turn into moans of pain as the chains are clanking in in the big chamber that he's in. All of that stuff stays with me. The sort of slasher stuff like Friday the 13th and all of that, it doesn't affect me. And I like horror where I'm actually genuinely afraid, and that the echoes or the imprints of that fear stay with me long afterward. Did you guys see it? Did you watch Terrifier?
No, and not the new one. I've seen the first two, but I didn't like it as it was in the first two. But that's just, I don't know, something about it. It wasn't my style, and I didn't watch the new one. I didn't bother. And I've seen a lot of people. It seems to either attract people and they love it and they talk about it like it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, or they don't like it. You know what I mean? They just hate it. So
yeah,
I don't know. I seem to lose interest. I don't find it. I don't know. It doesn't hold my attention for very long. Stuff like that. So I don't know.
Well, I think that's the great thing about horror. Everybody's got their own sort of genre and cross genre and their own things that they love.
The whole apocalyptic sort of thing, too, going on. What do you think that's all about? There's tons of it in young adult, and I see it in lots of books, movies, shows, streaming. It just seems to be all over. Everything is the end of the world, you know?
Yeah.
It's even in politics now.
Yeah, well,
yeah. I think that's actually, you're bang on there, Mike. You're bang on about that, about why we were kind of obsessing over it. I mean, I write Lovecraftian stuff, and basically what happens with Lovecraftian stuff is that you either go mad or you kill yourself. Those are the only two logical things whenever you're faced with the horror, the real cosmic horror of the nihilism out there. There's not a God that loves you. There's no entities there that are coming to save you. It's just these creatures who really don't care, and if you're insignificant. And in the face of that, in Lovecraftian horror, you either go mad or you kill yourself. And I think that's quite apocalyptic. It's a personal apocalypse. It's the triumph of nihilism, which is really scary. I think to me that's personally scary. I think that's what we're looking at now, and I try not to get too political, but I do see that. I see in politics there's a very clear choice where, we care for our fellow man or we don't. Now that is absolutely, that's stark. That's really, really stark. And, I have never fallen out with anybody over their choice of political candidate. I probably won't. Everybody has their own reasons why they vote the way they vote. But I tend to vote not for myself, but for in quotation marks, my neighbour. Those who need my vote the most. Those who are afraid for the future. How do we reassure those people who are afraid for the future? And that's why I believe that altruism wins and nihilism doesn't. But that's where I think the apocalypse. That's why everybody's looking at the Terminator was very prevalent in the 80s because nuclear war was around the corner.
Oh yeah, and that's all everybody was talking about. All the movies, everybody was nuclear war. You had like Ronald Reagan come in, and it seemed to be the thing that everyone was concerned about. Nowadays, I don't think we're necessarily I feel as much concerned about the nuclear war as we were in the 80s directly. There's a lot of other noise between nuclear war and what's going on. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I just noticed everything. Even young adults were interviewing people there, and their books are all, the end of the world.
Well, I've got this new series coming out called Nexus Astrum, and it's a young adult science fiction series which features mechs. It's a manga stuff. It's a comic book series. It's a novel series, and that's coming out next year. And I try with that and Dark Legacies. I try and create a more hopeful view of the future,
like Star Trek.
Star Trek and Star Wars are two of my favourite sci-fi. I mean, my love is Doctor Who, and I've been very, very fortunate to write a lot of Doctor Who in the last year. A lot of stuff.
What haven't you done, Chris? Chris, what haven't you done?
I'd love to do Blade Runner, actually.
Oh, that would be cool.
I would love to do Blade Runner.
You should have redid the second last movie. I didn't like that one. I loved the first part.
Yeah, it was quite long, wasn't it, the second one? I mean, I can't remember much about it.
Yeah.
But I have worked with Philip K. Dick's wife, Tessa B. Dick. I was in a cyberpunk anthology for her last year. Very interesting to listen to her stories about her husband as well. She could be a great guest for you guys. Yeah, it's all of that, the whole full sci-fi stuff. And even, like, the Stokerverse. I mean, I write some very horrific things in the Stokerverse. I don't pull my punches. Like, we've a new book, coming to Kickstarter tomorrow called Shadows of the Stokerverse. And it's a fully illustrated novel. It's illustrated by Clint Langley. Again's another legendary artist who is mostly known for Warhammer, his Warhammer art, and his work in 2000 AD. But I mean, incredible artist. He actually was the artist in the Stokerverse RPG. And we create this very, very, like, brutal hellscape. And there's, it's quite grim. But I always try and put in points of light there. I mean, Van Helsing, whenever he meets Mina in the original, he says, they're lights, and you are one of the lights. And I think that's important in horror as well. We have to remember that there needs to be points of light to anchor our humanity. So I try and write, again, it's strange as it sounds, I try and write Stokerverse horror with those points of light in mind. That yes, there's a lot of evil out there, and there's temptation for you to join the forces of darkness, but there's also the pull and the call to help others, to have your soul anchored to that altruism, and that's why I actually really like Dracula, because there's the famous scene where Dracula grabs Mina and forces her to drink blood. In the Stokerverse, we looked at it from, what was Bram really intending, and it wasn't, in our minds, it wasn't an erotic scene. It was this cadaver who takes a dirty, fingernail, cuts open his breast, grabs Mina's face and slams it into his chest, and she's forced to drink a concoction of blood and pus and all sorts, because he's a corpse. So, it's horrific. And when the band of heroes break in, Dracula leers at them, but specifically leers at Jonathan Harker. And he takes Mina's face from his chest and shows Harker his wife's face covered with all this horrible stuff, and then flings her from him, and then, as if to say it's a gesture of, do you want her now? And in all excitement, the band of heroes rushing and Van Helsing brandishing the crucifix and all that, people miss what happens. The response of Harker is that he runs straight to his wife. Love always wins. Love defeats evil. And that's what you see in the novel Dracula, where, throughout all of it, and the horrendous things that happen to Mina, I mean, she knows what happened to Lucy, she knows what's going to happen to her, but she's determined to stop this creature. She's determined to stop this monster. So bravery, courage, love, all the good of humanity is also displayed in Dracula. And so I try and display that in the Stokerverse as well. And not just, monsters are cool. And it's great to write scary scenes. But I never want to stray away from that, because I think that's what Bram really wanted, was that the fight of good versus evil, and that good wins.
Every time I think of Jonathan Harker, I think of Keanu Reeves.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, poor Keanu. Yeah, it's like the movie Dracula's. I've just written a book, nearly finished the manuscript of the entirety of vampire cinema that's being published by Telos next year, and that was a labour of love, of trying to track down all these films, like Tarzan versus Dracula, Batman versus Dracula, Samson versus Dracula. There's a whole, wave of these films. I think there's over 160 Dracula films or something like that, or films that have vampires in them, or something. It's crazy amount.
I'm sure there's a Jack the Ripper versus Dracula.
There is.
Oh yes,
there is. Go and look it up. There is. I have a memory of seeing it on YouTube. But it was very, very hard to track these films down. And out of all of them, I have to say I love the Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, Hammer horror, because
yeah.
the Peter Cushing was an excellent Van Helsing, and you really believed he was the one that could stop Dracula with his mannerisms, his intelligence, and I think the first one came out in 58 for Hammer, and the bit where it's at the end, and Peter Cushing jumps up on the table and rips down the curtain, and the sunlight comes in. It was a very dynamic, action-packed ending. But again, it was that kind of emphasis that good always defeats evil. Evil's ancient, and it can be very scary, and it can be long-lived, and it lives long within the hearts of humans. And that's why we create these creatures and all sorts of things, because we're almost, well, for me, it's almost like an exorcism. Yeah, I mean, when I write horror, and I've talked to some people in the community about this, it's almost like an exorcism of the darkness within, a little bit, and maybe that's why people write about apocalyptic horror more now. All of that kind of stuff, maybe there's a little bit of that too. Who knows?
Thinking there's a connection with Peter Cushing and Star Wars, and
yes.
There's something there.
Yeah, he wore slippers as Moff Tarkin because he didn't like shoes. Yeah, it was really funny. There was an anecdote that Carrie Fisher told where she says, she was being menaced by Peter Cushing, and then every time she looked down, he was wearing fluffy slippers, and she laughed. But when I was doing the research for the Vampire Cinema book, it seemed that he was a lovely man, Peter Cushing, a real gentleman. He loved his wife. When his wife passed away, he tried to induce a heart attack by running up and down stairs all night, and then he stopped because he was a committed Roman Catholic and he was afraid of committing an mortal sin. But he loved his wife an awful lot, and he, whenever I was reading books about him, very gentle soul. But he played these magnificent evil psychopaths, like in Star Wars, and Baron Frankenstein in the Hammer stuff as well. He was completely driven by one thing and one thing only: the monster.
Him and Christopher Lee, the whole group, I love them. Yes.
So when I say I'm not really into horror movies, I did just sit and watch every vampire film I can get my hands on for research purposes. I do. Maybe it's a little disingenuous. I think I mean to say that a lot of modern popular horror leaves me cold. I mean, I love movies about serial killers and all of that kind of stuff, because that's the real horror, right? It's very relatable. It's out there. God knows how many serial killers are in Canada at the minute. All of that kind of stuff that, and it ties into the Terminator a little bit. The Terminator's the ultimate serial killer. Knocks on the door, asks if you're Sarah Connor, and then shoots you. I mean, it's pretty scary. But you just open the door one day, and that scene in the Terminator where it's, it's sunny, there's kids playing outside, knocks on the door, are you Sarah Connor? Yeah. Then he pulls a gun and shoots the woman. Right between the eyes.
Total lack of remorse. That's it.
Yeah. It's, and you have that with, I don't want to segue too far into this, but you have, the BTK killer and all those serial killers, and they do that. It's they'll case out a house, they'll do a home invasion, and then they'll do horrible things and kill people, and it's out there. That's real. I think those are the scary films for me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's what people really do that's scary. Hey, what do you think about that new? Have you heard about that new book or new writing found about from?
Yeah, yes, this is very exciting for fans of Bram Stoker and Irish literature. So, Giblet Hill is it's a rediscovered work of Bram Stoker's. So it was published in a short story anthology, and then was completely forgotten about. I think even Bram forgot about it. It was written before Dracula, and the Stoker family didn't know anything about it. And then this chap, Brian Cleary, he discovered it. So Dacre had to sign an NDA about it, and he was only able to start talking about it. Was it last week? I think it was last week. So I can't really talk about it too much, but it will be coming into the Stokerverse.
Oh, nice.
At some stage, there's a piece of work that's coming out next year, which is the Irish origins of Dracula. There are two very important works in the Stoker family that point to the Irish origins of Dracula, which I'm very passionate about, because there's no doubt in my mind that, Bram was influenced by the mythologies of the time. Like the White Worm is Crom Criach, the real reasons for Samhain in Ireland, where children were sacrificed to the serpent or the worm onto the ground for fertility purposes. And that's what it really means when St. Patrick came to destroy the serpents, remove the serpents. It was the removal of Crom Criach. It was the removal of the White Worm, the worship of the White Worm. Because there was no snakes in Ireland at all. But there was snake worship, there was serpent worship. And that was where White Worm came from. It was from those stories that Bram Stoker's nanny told him when he was young.
Yeah, that's it's pretty cool. They found something new, and I just thought that was totally out of the blue. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I think it had been found maybe a year ago, and they sort of had to sit on it for a little bit. And this is going to be great. I think Brian's got a book coming out next year about it all, how he discovered it, and its importance. And I think for Irish literature, it's incredibly important.
Yeah, I think that's cool. Well, anyway, so let's give all the information for Stokerverse and yourself and stuff. Where do people go?
So you can come to www.stokerverse.com. We have a brand new website featuring all our different bits and pieces. You'll see some of the stuff that Dacre and I do outside Stokerverse as well. If you're interested in my Star Trek stuff or Dacre's other novels, it's all there. You can also follow us on Facebook at Stokerverse, and we also have a Facebook group called Stoker and McAuley, and that's where you'll get all the information about any events that we're going to or anything we're taking part in.
Well, okay. We'll have everything up on our website so people can find it.
Great.
And we really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. It's always fun.
I love talking. That was a great conversation.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.